This is the Breakaway Podcast, presented by the National Bird Hunters Association. The NBHA's Breakaway Podcast is brought to you by Purina Pro Plan, fine-tuned nutrition to promote strength and stamina in the canine athlete and longest-standing supporter of the sport of field trialing nationwide. You can fuel your champion with Purina Pro Plan using various physical and online retailers nationwide found wherever pet food is sold. Purina Pro Plan, fuel the champion within. Garmin, delivering innovative GPS-enabled technology across diverse markets, including sports and fitness, outdoor recreation, marine, automotive, and aviation. Garmin, engineered on the inside for life on the outside. Gundog Supply, the leader in training collars, tracking collars, and so much more. Fast, friendly service, great customer support, and the newest gun dog products on the market. Gundog Supply, we train our dogs with the products we sell. Mule brand clothing and apparel, outdoor clothing for all sorts of environments and conditions. From hunters in briars and wading creeks to forestry personnel, farmers, motorcycle riders, and utility workers, Mule is clothing for hunters, made by hunters for over 38 years. Find your Mule brand gear at www.okidogsupply.com. Gun Dog Central. Gun Dog Central is a centralized location for finding your next dog, whether it be a pointing dog, retriever, flusher, versatile breed, hound, or even terrier, you name it. Gun Dog Central is the place to find your next canine athlete. To find your next champion, visit them at www.gundogcentral.com. onX Hunt, the #1 hunting GPS app. Join the millions of hunters who trust onX Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. onX Hunt, know where you stand. And Park Cities Quail Coalition. Park Cities Quail Coalition is a nonprofit organization run 100% by volunteers who are passionate about sporting traditions and determined to make it available to future generations by working to sustain and restore huntable wild quail populations, to encourage and educate interested youth, and to celebrate the quail hunting heritage. Welcome back to the fourth installment of the Breakaway Podcast. I am once again your host, Joe Hopkins. So glad that you've tuned in. Our guest this week is NBHA Vice President Mr. Greg Blair from Menomonee Falls, Wisconsin. Greg is a senior specialist for Purina Pro Plan, working within the bird dog segment of the brand. He has also served as NBHA Secretary and President and currently chairs the NBHA National Open Championship in Danseyville, Tennessee, while sitting on the board of the 12 O'Clock Field Trial Club. Greg is an active upland hunter and also an accomplished field trialer in his own right. Greg does or has participated in walking, horseback, cover dog, NSTRA, and AKC trials and enjoyed great success with his 4-time champion and 3-time national champion, Blair's Witch Project, who unfortunately passed away this spring. Handled by both Greg and professional handler and trainer Tom Waite of Dale Creek Gun Dogs, Guy has been one of the most preeminent poster dogs for the NBHA in the 20-teen years, while being NBHA Amateur Shooting Dog of the Year twice and also forming himself into an AKC field champion as well. Cementing his place in field trial history, Blair's Witch Project will be a part of the 2023-2024 NBHA Hall of Fame induction class next July. Greg got his start in shoot to retrieve, experiencing great success with a German Shorthair Pointer named champion Nina's Creek Unanswered Prayer. Rookie was responsible for helping kickstart Greg's field trial career by winning a regional championship and being a multi-high point dog of the year on that circuit. From Wisconsin, Greg is also passionate about the grouse woods and has also participated in various cover dog events and supports the Wisconsin Cover Dog Championship annually. Currently on Greg's string is NBHA Futurity winner and Derby of the Year Pointer Male Blair's Calvary Mountain, along with NBHA Puppy Classic winner Blair's Holy Thunder. On this episode, Greg joins me to discuss the various formats within the American Field banner and to talk about their differences and maybe some similarities. But before we get to Greg, we'd like to recognize and acknowledge some placements and winners of some past trials. The Nebraska State Classic and NBHA Classic wrapped up on August 24th at the grounds of Justin Crook. being the winner, Unfinished Business, a pointer male owned by John Gaines and handled by Justin Crook of Powerhouse Kennels. Second place went to Sycamore Creek Cody, a setter male and actually one of last year's Futurity callback dogs owned by Bob Kelly and handled by Zach Ernie of Chippewa Valley Kennels, and a pointer male named John being named third. The Southwestern All-Age Championship in Trail City, South Dakota concluded with Aaron's Code of Honor by Aaron's Red Rum being named champion, owned by Alan Linder and handled by Luke and Eisenhart, with runner-up champion being named Miller's Heat Advisory, owned by John Mattias and handled by Judd Carlton. Following the Southwestern All-Age Championship, pointer female Panther Creek Rosie was named champion of the All-American Shooting Dog Championship. Rosie is owned by Frank Rutland and handled by Tommy Rice. Taking runner-up honors was Lester's Another Shockwave. The pointer male was handled by Sean Kinkler and is owned by a syndicate including Dr. Tom Jackson, Jerry Morrison, Lance Schultz, Bjorn Peterson, and Todd Manns. On to the cover dog world. The North American Woodcock Championship and the North American Woodcock Futurity in New Brunswick concluded. Alan Rahano's pointer female Chase Hill Poison Ivy won the championship, handled by John Stoljatis, with pointer female Carriage Cracklin Rosalie named runner-up champion, who is owned and handled by Robert Little. The North American Woodcock Futurity saw a duo of treble placements for handler John Stoljatis, who handled 3 of the 4 placements, while East Coast breeder Gary Winall bred 3 of the 4 placements as well. First place in the Futurity was Mohawk Mill Double E, owned by Ellen Clements and Aaron Stoljatis, handled by John Stoljatis. Second place was Chase Hill Snoop Dogg, owned by Aaron Stoljatis, handled again by John Stoljatis. Third place belonged to Mohawk Mill Miss Ellie, owned by Aaron Stoljatis, owned by John Stoljatis. And rounding out the placements was Sunk Hayes Orange Jerry, owned and handled by Mike Fwelling. Moving on to the upcoming NBHA dates will be the Southwestern Missouri Walking Field Trial Club's fall trial held at the Robert E. Talbot Conservation Area in Mount Vernon, Missouri on September 22nd, with entries closing on September 18th, followed by the Northern Missouri Field Trial Association's fall trial at the grounds of Kevin and Heather Western in Martinstown, Missouri on September 30th, with dates closing September 26th. The Cypress Church Field Trial Club will have their fall trial at the Boyd Ranch in Mexia, Texas on October 7th, with entries closing October 5th. The Northern Missouri Field Trial Association will have their trial at the Sportsman's Association grounds in Grove Springs, Missouri on October 7th, with entries closing October 1st. The Oil Capital Field Trial Association will also have their fall trial at the Ingersoll Ranch in Enola, Oklahoma on October 7th, with entries closing October 5th. And lastly, rounding out our upcoming dates will be the Hill Country Bird Hunters Club with their trial at Dickie Sorrell's lease on the Porter Ranch in Hubbard, Texas on October 14th. Entries closing October 10th. Other trials of note coming up for the month of September will be the Northern New England Open Woodcock Championship September 15th in Fryeburg, Maine, the Region 14 Amateur Shooting Dog Championship September 17th in Alberta, the 60th Annual National Shooting Dog Futurity in Bloomingdale, Ohio on September 19th, Region 9 Amateur Shooting Dog Championship September 21st in American Falls, Idaho, the Idaho State Open Shooting Dog Championship to follow the Region 9 Shooting Dog Championship, the National Amateur Grouse Championship September 21st in Phillipsburg, PA, the National Amateur Prairie Chicken Shooting Dog Championship September 22nd in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin, NGSPA Region 9 Championships start mid-September at the Richardson Ranch in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and the National Prairie Chicken Shooting Dog Championship will be at the conclusion of the Amateur Championship, with the New England Open Grouse Championship in Berlin, New Hampshire on September 25th. Now that you're caught up on everything in the world of field trials, let's welcome in Mr. Greg Blair. Joining me now on the Breakaway Podcast is NBHA Vice President and fellow board member and good friend, Mr. Greg Blair. Greg, thanks for coming in. How's it going, man?
It's going well. Thanks for having me on, Joe. And on behalf of all of us, thanks for all your efforts in putting this together and, introducing field trialing and the bird dogs to a lot of people. We've had good success with it, and a lot of that comes from you. So thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. And I appreciate that. It's been a lot of fun meeting new people and getting feedback and finding out what people want to hear about and the questions that they have. And this is going to be one of those episodes, Greg, that I've gotten a lot of feedback on when we've kind of put our feelers out there into the ether. about what people want to hear, the questions they want to get answered, and stuff like that. One of the main things that keeps bouncing back is they want to know more about the different disciplines and the different types of dogs and all those things under the American Field umbrella. I got to bouncing around and thinking about the people that could help flesh this out, and I couldn't think of anybody better but you, because you're kind of like me. You've got your hands and feet in a little bit of everything with regards to the field trial world, and I thought you'd be perfect for this. But one thing I want to start with, Greg, is a lot of people want to know, and they really like the stories of how people got started. How did Greg Blair get started in bird dogs as a whole?
Well, I'll give you hopefully a quick synopsis. I was not brought up in a hunting family. My family gave me a good foundation of, faith in the outdoors and each other, but nothing as far as hunting. My business partner introduced me to hunting with the Springer Spaniel. We'd go out and chase pheasants at the local, state grounds. But then I was going through a sports show back in 98 or 99, and there was a gentleman there selling short hair pups, and I had hunted over my other buddy's wire hair, and I knew if I had a pointing dog, I'd love it. So I actually bought my first short hair at a sports show here in Wisconsin, and like I said, that was 98. So that's how I got my first dog, and that's how I kind of got it, dipped my toe. I knew nothing nothing about the whole bird dog world at that time.
Do you remember, Greg, what the first field trial you attended was? Who took you? Who convinced you to go?
Well, yeah, and it started with that gentleman at the sports show with the short hair. Come to find out, he was involved in Astra here, shoot to retrieve in Wisconsin. And I don't know if he could tell that I was pretty green or looking for something to do, but he invited me up to his place and basically introduced me to an Astra trial. I kept score. I caught birds. I planted birds. I'd run my dog as a buy dog, and then about 2 years later, I was in full-fledged into shoot to retrieve. So 2001, well, maybe 2000, I started competitively field trialing.
So there's a gap in history here. If we're just kind of looking at it from 30,000 feet, we're talking a lot about shoot to retrieve. Wonderful organization, wonderful people, great format, huge footprint in the field trial world. But when I think of Greg Blair, and the most people that know you, they think of a different acronym, and that's NBHA. How did Greg Blair find his feet in the NBHA? Where did that get bridged over?
It all kind of dovetails together because, most people won't want to hear this, but the short hair that I had in shoot to retrieve wasn't a big natural retriever. So I knew of Tom Waite from Dale Creek Gun Dogs. He force fetched my short hair named Rookie. He force fetched him for me. Went on, competed in Astra, but I always went out by Tom and trained with him. And about 2006 or 7, just after I won the regional with Rookie, Tom asked me to come and judge a walk-in field trial up in Green Bay. And so I'm like, Tom, I know nothing about field trials for the American fields. In Astra, we take a test every year. He's like, no, bird dogs, you know what you're looking for. I'll put you with a senior judge or an experienced gentleman. And so I judged my first field trial. I got hooked watching broke dogs work, and that's what started it all, probably in 2006 I fully got out of Astra in 2008 and started running broke dog stakes in the walking game then.
Interesting. And, there's a side note here, and some of our field trial patrons are going to wince when they hear me say this, but sometimes the best way to learn about, the field trial world and the game and what you know and what you see and how you can interpret it is to jump in the judging saddle. And sometimes you don't feel like you belong there, especially when you're starting out. But the fact of the matter is, how are you going to know if you don't see dogs over and over and over and sit beside somebody that does know a lot about what they've seen? So
exactly. And it was a weekend trial, and it was Rod Line, who's big in the cover dog segment right now. So even back then, he was well known, and we talked every brace. We talked about what we saw, what we liked, what we didn't like. So it was great. It was a good experience.
Some of your fondest memories or your biggest accomplishments, Greg, over the course of your field trial career, when we look at Greg's career up to this point, and there's a lot left, what comes to mind? What are those memories?
Well, I have to say in shoot to retrieve. I mean, I just came from working at one of their national championships last week. And so to see those guys compete, it brought me back to, I won the regional in 2005 with Rookie, my only short hair. As an amateur, I had nothing about it. And on the last day, you've got to run, I think it's two half-hour braces and then an hour brace. So to win that, I can still remember pulling out of the parking lot and calling my wife and saying I did it. And she's like, "You did what?" No, I did it. We did it. So that was great. Putting my first championship as an amateur on a field trial dog, I will never forget that. And over in Iowa, at Dr. Haynes' property, Jeff Wallace and Dr. Haynes put on the Invitational. Again, my first text was to Tom Wade, told him about it. I knew I probably wouldn't get him on the phone, so I called Dr. Dunbar, who had bred this dog, and I was so happy. I talked to him after pulling out of the McDonald's parking lot and talked to him for about an hour of, I did it again, but there was a big gap. 2005, so that was probably 2015, 16. So those two, your firsts, you remember that all the time. And
yeah.
That's some of the best.
Okay, Greg, in your intro, there was a specific dog that took up a lot of real estate in that intro, Blair's Witch Project, or Guy, as he's known by those close to him. Yep. What word comes to mind when we mention Blair's Witch Project to Greg? Talk briefly about Guy.
Honest. He was the most honest dog I've ever been around, and anyone could take him out. I could take him out. My daughter could run him. Tom could run him. Club members have ran him. He was as honest as the day is long and just wanted to be with you. He was, I don't think I'll ever have one like him, but he was the most honest dog I've ever run.
Yeah, definitely a dog of a lifetime. And I know when I first started getting into the NBHA, I just saw this black and white tick setter all over the place. Like, he was literally everywhere you looked. He was on every table in every state winning some trophy. He's going to be inducted into our Hall of Fame this coming July 2024, and rightfully so. And we may talk a little bit more about Guy, but we'll definitely be seeing him from here on out in our Hall of Fame. Greg, you're with Purina, NBHA, 12 o'clock field trial club, all these different arms and legs you have in the field trial world. But one of the important things that you do for the NBHA is you essentially run the NBHA National Open Championship. Can you tell me about what kind of task that is?
Sure. So the duty of my vice president position is to run the Open National Championship. And approximately 6-7 years ago, it would always rotate, and it would be Missouri, then it'd be in the Carolinas, and then it would be in Arkansas, then it would be in Georgia. Well, after looking at that for a while, we found out it really wasn't a national championship because it was pretty much regional. The people in that area would go to it that year, and they wouldn't travel when it was somewhere else. So I proposed, hey, let's find a central location for it. And I think it was 2017. I can't exactly remember. We said we were going to the Midwest. And the first place we ran in the Midwest was at Ames. So we were able to host the first ever NBHA Walk-In National Championship on Ames Plantation.
Really cool.
So we ran continuous courses. We had the callback. It was great. So we liked the central location. So we ended up talking to the West Tennessee Field Trial Club up in Dancyville, the Curry family and Ike Todd and all those individuals. And they opened their arms up, open wide to us. Blake Kukar, Dr. Spiata. So we've been on those grounds, like I said, since 17 or 18. And it's great. In the first 2 or 3 years, we ran in the huge open bean fields, almost part of the courses that the all-age guys run on. Now, I can look back now and say, those grounds are probably too big for our walking, and we're going to get into walking versus horseback here a little bit. Yeah. But the dog we just talked about, Guy, he wandered on those grounds. But what I said about him being honest, it took a special dog to win it on those grounds. So about 3 years ago, we changed the course. We start in an open big bean field for a nice cast. We go into more piney woods. It's kind of like across in the Midwest rolling brome grass and piney woods and Dr. Spiata's. And then we come out of that and we finish in some big bean fields. So we've got a good blend right now for the national championship there in Danseyville. And without that West Tennessee Field Trial Club, I couldn't do it. I mean, I'm 8 hours away from there, but they open their arms. They take care of all the food. We have a fish fry. We have a steak fry. And I think it's gone over very well. We've brought people in from, Missouri, Wisconsin, Georgia, the Carolinas, Arkansas, Texas, hopefully Ohio. So it's going well, and I'm looking forward to it again this year.
That's awesome. And to me, what's more awesome for that situation is the fact that when you reached out to the West Tennessee Field Trial Club and all those individuals about this proposal, they couldn't have been more accommodating, and they just didn't want to do it once. They wanted it again. And they literally roll out the red carpet for these people in a format through which most of the West Tennessee Field Trial Club members don't even compete in. But they still absolutely just pour their heart and soul into this trial for our organization. And immense gratitude goes to them for those efforts and for you as well, because it's a big undertaking and it's a big trial.
Yeah, it is. It's a big trial. I mean, we've got stables there. We've got ample places to park and camp and dog stakeouts. And you're right. They like to have a good time, and they like us. And they're telling us that we have to come back, and that I can never retire. So Lord willing, we're going back. And that's always like one of the last weeks in February, the first weeks in March, and that's where right after Futurity we kicked off our circuit.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's a little bit about you, Greg, the field trialer, and Greg with the professional hat on, and all those things that you do and run into. But before we get into the meat of our discussion here, and while you're here, I wanted to kind of tell the readers that when I called you the other day to start getting our thoughts together and getting some times nailed down to do this interview, you told me to give you a call anytime you had a long drive ahead of you. And I felt really bad for you. I thought, oh, here's Greg again. He's on the road, another meeting, another conference, all these things he's got to do, very busy guy, and here I am bothering him. But when I talked to you, you said you'd been on a certain hunting trip, and suddenly I didn't feel so bad. You want to tell us a little bit about this hunting trip, Greg?
I'll be short and brief. I mentioned earlier that I was at a NASTRA championship in Iowa about a week or so ago. So yeah, what I did is I went down to south of Des Moines, Osceola, Iowa, went to the NASTRA trial, and I drove 10 hours north up into North Dakota and went hunting for 4 days with Tom at Tom Waite's place in North Dakota. So yeah, you don't have to feel too sorry for me.
I definitely don't.
It was self-inflicted, and I would have to say, and people are coming back with it, even the trainers, those were probably 4 of the most consistent days we've had out there as far as moisture, birds, cover. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
It was a good time.
Yeah, it's great. Some great pictures on Facebook too, and those dogs are surely ready to go for this field trial season. But Greg, we're here to talk about field trials within the American Field banner, what those are, the differences, and maybe some similarities if we can find those. And I just want to brief the listeners real quick on the history of field trials and not go too deep before me and you start discussing things. And essentially, field trials were started organically to really see who had the best dog. Like, let's get them out of the truck, throw them on the ground. Let's see who can find birds, who finds birds the best, and who finds the most, and whatever of those other components that defined that competition at the time. But over time, field trials evolved as a sort of promulgator to better the breed of bird dogs. Now we just didn't want to know who had the best dog. We wanted to start bettering our breed and building those breeds from the ground up based on the components that made them special. And the field trial landscape was the best place to showcase those and allow a market to decide what was considered good, what was considered negligible, and what could go by the wayside. And winners of field trials essentially has what's carried our competitive nature and our breeds through the sport over time. And, a little history here with the American Field. It was established in 1874, and it was, I'm pretty sure, the only editorial for the sport of bird dog trials at the same time. And it brought along with it the Field Dog Stud Book at the same time, which was and still is, I'm pretty sure, the oldest purebred dog registration in the United States. But add a little context to this next point, Greg. We fast forward from a long time ago up until September 1st of 2021.
Right.
The UKC acquires the American Field and the Field Dog Stud Book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So yeah, it was September 1st. Mr. Bernie Mathis called. I mean, I remember where I was there too, driving. He called and stated that they had sold, I won't say the rights, they sold the business, the Field Dog Stud Book, to the United Kennel Club. So that that was right around COVID. So everything was kind of on a pause and slow paced. And so we really didn't know, what to expect. So we knew something had to be done. So the UKC from then on has taken over. They'll still call it the American Field and the Field Dog Stud Book, which is great. It's fine, but it is under the UKC umbrella. So now you've got the AKC registry. You have the UKC, which holds the Field Dog Stud Book. So the Field Dog Stud Book has not gone away. The American Field has not gone away. It's just under the umbrella of the United Kennel Club.
Sure.
So it's still basically run the same way under the same governing bodies. Again, the AFTCA has been there to help, the process. So, I mean, I really, other than that, on the 30,000 foot view, that's pretty much what I know of it.
And some of our new trialers wouldn't even know that transition happened because
correct,
we're still functioning without a hitch. Like there was no drop off in trials or competition or no learning curve or whatever. We're still business as usual. So
correct.
being at business as usual within the American Field, there are essentially 3 different disciplines or 3 different types of formats that we're going to talk about tonight. And those are horseback field trials, cover dog field trials, and walking trials. Now, there's a lot of different components within each or all 3 of those, and we're going to go over pretty much the main differences to start with regards to competition amongst the 3. Greg, you and me both have competed in all 3 of these to a certain degree. Kick it off with the horseback trials. The name implies pretty much the biggest difference, but tell us about horseback trials.
I think, Joe, you and I, what we talked about the other day, we need to have a disclaimer too.
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff, we're going to give you the parameters.
Right.
But again, this is going to be the majority of what we see out there. Obviously, there's going to be outliers here and outliers there, and we're not saying everything. I will use a word all and everyone, but I don't mean that. There are outliers, so take it with a grain.
Please consult your field trial doctor before taking any of these recommendations. And
I think his email address is kensauer@nbha. No, I'm just kidding. If you want to Sorry, Ken. So correct. Horseback, cover dog, walking. And those basically are the formats. Horseback, the handlers are on horseback. And again, we're probably talking to a vast amount of people who understand this, but we're really shooting for maybe those newbies or those people who are just getting into it, or people in NASTRA or Shoot Your Retriever, NAVDA that are listening. So horseback, cover dog, and walking field trials are run on a course or 6 courses, whatever it may be. And let's just talk, this whole conversation, let's just talk about 1 hour braces.
Sure.
So it's 2 handlers are on horseback. They cut the dogs loose. You got the judges on horseback that are following, and you got the gallery, be it 2 people, be it 25 people on horses, maybe some in a bird wagon, and then you got the 2 scouts. So they'll go around for the hour. We can get into more detail on the standards and everything like that. So you've got the horseback. Handlers are on horseback, and then within that, you've got the shooting dog and the all-age. The shooting dogs, the all-age dogs run the biggest typically, and the shooting dogs a little bit less, but there is a little crossover.
Right.
So, you move on to the cover dog, and as it states, it's run in the cover, which for all of us that run there, it's the grouse and the woodcock cover. So these trials are predominantly run from the East Coast, New Hampshire, Maine, all the way over to Minnesota, through Michigan, through Pennsylvania, through even Ohio, I'm not sure, Wisconsin. It's run in the woods on wild birds. Again, the handlers now are on foot walking through a course in the woods. So no horseback. There might be some horses that carry the judges in
Right.
some of the grounds that it's open enough to ride. The cover dog dogs are on wild birds in the woods, again, running in braces. Now, walking, be that NBHA, US Complete, SBHA, ABHA, are basically exactly what the cover dog does. The two handlers walk, but it can be walking out on edges of fields. It can be walking through a piney woods course. It's not typically on wild birds. It's usually liberated, but there are some that are wild birds. But again, like cover dog, the handlers are on foot. But in the walking, it kind of mimics the horseback circuit, where you got the judges on horses, the gallery can be on horses, and the scouts are on horses. So the only difference is the handlers are walking versus a horseback. And on that circuit, the dogs typically do not cast out as far as on the shooting dog and all age circuit.
And another big difference is the fact that most of your cover dog trials on wild birds and most of your horseback trials, they're on multiple courses. So you could you could show up to a venue, there can be 3 to 8 courses maybe, and then our format of walking trials are on essentially one course. Now we do have an outlier. We do have an outlier with the NBHA Sharptail Championship, which does have multiple courses. But if you go to a regular weekend trial or most of our championships, those are going to be on a single course. Every dog there, every brace will run on the same course. Now,
correct.
Those are our 3 formats. We breeze through those. A lot of people want to know, because they've not been in field trials. These are a lot of people that have never competed, and they're just kind of dipping their toe into it. They want to know what breeds of dogs are eligible or permitted to compete, Greg.
Yeah, all pointing dogs. I mean, I'll just say it. All pointing dogs, registered purebreds, compete in the American field and the AFTCA. Predominantly, though, as we can chat and talk about, is the horseback circuit, the cover dog circuit are typically pointers and setters.
Right.
Our walking game, pointers, setters, short hairs, Brittany's, Vizslas. I've seen some wire hairs.
Yeah.
They're more susceptible to the walking game. The range is more susceptible to those continental breeds, other breeds, and a lot of them win. We've had some really competitive short hairs. Justin Hess has had some really nice Vizslas that have won with us. But predominantly the cover dog and the horseback, you're going to see pointers and setters.
Yeah. Yep. And those continental breeds, some of the continental breeds have their own kind of their own competitions, and they kind of stay together there. But there's a lot of mixture in the walking trials, more or less, compared to the other 2 formats.
Correct.
There's a lot of different breeds. So all pointing breeds, great answer, and really the only answer. Now, the next question that we get a lot, Greg, is they want to know what birds that their dogs are going to be judged on within these 3 disciplines. Do each one of these formats run on totally different birds? Do they overlap? Do they share? Where do they run on?
Well, obviously the cover dog, as I stated, is going to be on grouse and woodcock. And if you happen to see an advertisement, and I didn't know this when I started, and I had to learn it, so maybe some people don't know it, but if you see the Wisconsin Cover Dog Championship, that a dog can go and run in that and enter it and can win by pointing a woodcock or a grouse. It doesn't matter. But if it states the Minnesota Grouse Championship, the dog must point a grouse to be named a champion.
Gotcha.
So there is a little bit of a species difference in the cover dog segment. The AFTCA does have some other ones that are the Pheasant Championship or the Prairie Chicken Championship or the International Woodcock or whatever it may be. So if it states that in the ad, it has to be, those dogs have to point that.
That's a good point.
In the horseback segment, coming up middle October, they're having the Central Carolina Jamboree, which is the Tar Heel. These are all held at Hoffman, which is quail grounds. But they're actually going to hold the International Pheasant / Open Pheasant Championships there, and they're going to release hundreds of pheasants at Hoffman.
Really cool.
So at the end of the trial, or at the end of the Tar Heel and the Central Carolina, they'll run the pheasant after the release. So those dogs have to point a pheasant. But typically the all-age circuit is quail. Now, those that have come off of the prairies, we just had the Southwestern, and I think there might be one other one up there.
The All-American Shooting Dog Championship.
Yeah, up in Carson. Those are all wild birds, sharp tails, Huns, whatever might be out there in the Dakotas. But typically it's quail, Grove Springs to Arkansas, Boonville, down to Florida, the Georgia, and the Carolinas. Cover dog is, grouse and woodcock. The walk-in segment across those segments associations that I mentioned earlier are pretty much 95% liberated quail. Liberated meaning we'll seed the course before the trial starts, and we'll have a bird planter follow along every single brace and make sure that if birds are flying off, that the course is reseeded. And like I said, the outlier to that is the NBHA has now, the Sharptail Championship, which is run on wild sharptails here in northern Wisconsin.
And Greg, I'm going to interrupt you, but I'm just seeing a text message come across my phone. The entry for that championship
is due tonight,
and it's massive. It is massive.
Well, put it this way: we were in North Dakota, and I was working with Tom and getting our entries, and I knew him alone. He could have had, I think I counted 14 shooting dogs, just him alone.
I'm not going to say the number. But I just saw a number, and it's massive. The only thing I can tell our listeners, stop what you're doing and say a couple Hail Marys for James Cleve. This is going to be a big trial.
Well, he might want to scratch that Derby puppy.
I'm afraid he's going to be putting out sandwiches and marshalling and doing all kinds of stuff.
Well, we'll help him out when we get up there.
There you go.
I think Tom's entries were down to about 10 or 11, but I thought in my mind when I was putting that together for just our kennel alone, I'm like, if the Ernie boys, if Crook comes, if Tom's there, all those amateurs that are up there in Minnesota and Wisconsin and James, and if the guys from Kentucky come up there, ouch.
Yeah. Yeah. Ouch is right.
But let me say something to that too. We're talking about different types of formats and winning trials. Don't let that scare people. Don't let that, as an amateur, if you got a good dog that is good on wild birds, don't let it scare you that the pros are coming with their string of 10 or 12 dogs. Sure. Any dog has their day, especially on wild birds.
Absolutely.
And wild birds can kill 48 dogs, and you could have 5 dogs get through. And I've heard that in the past of the amateur. I'm not going to go up there because of blah, blah, blah. And don't let that scare you.
No.
It's a great time.
And look, I tell people like this, if you're going to a field trial to compete, to win, if you think you're going to win every trial you enter and that's the only reason why you go, you're going to be more upset than you are pleased with it. This trial or trials like this, it's more about the experience. You're going up to grounds that are unbelievable. You're going to be around a huge number of good dogs. You're going to get to see great things, meet great people on great grounds. It's an experience, more or less.
Yep. Good.
Now, the main thing here, like what people are banging on the floor about, is they want to know, Greg, what are the differences, the major differences in the types of dogs that run in each of these disciplines? Are there any differences? And if there are, what are they?
Okay. And again, we go back to our disclaimer. There's going to be outliers. This is my opinion, but I've seen a lot. I know this is what I feel. It's the range. And that's why they're labeled walking, shooting dog, or all age. So the range is different. We'll just say that. But there is so much gray area in between. And I'll use an example, and then we can get into it even further. My guide dog that we talked about earlier, won in the Grouse Woods, 3-time national champion in the NBHA, won horseback, and is an AKC field champion. Majority of his placements there are horseback. Okay. So he was a dog, and when I said he was an honest dog, the walking dogs, in my opinion, have to be almost stupidly broke, the big running ones, because
they really do.
You can't get there like you can get there on a horse.
Right.
Now, the dogs I've seen on the horseback circuit, I'll take hands down because they're as honest as they come.
Sure.
But when we're running those big bean fields, at Coffee Gap and Dancyville, and you see them pointed, and honestly, 250, 300 yards away, and you can't run, and it's muddy, and it's raining, and they got to be there till you get there.
Yeah.
So they have to be really honest. Now, Joe, you and I come from the probably same mold of we like to see big run and walking dogs.
You better believe it.
Now, a good judge will be able to separate a horseback dog, a runoff, a dog that doesn't show up. The walking game dogs, even if they're big running, they need to handle, they need to show up, they need to look at for you.
Yeah.
You need to find them pointed. If you don't see them for 5, 7, 8 minutes, you should come around the corner and see them pointed. So I like a big running dog, even as a walk-in, but it's tough because you've got to have a special one that'll stand there till you get there.
And grounds dictate that too, Greg. Like some of the grounds are going to lend themselves to bigger dogs, and they're going to show better on a big running dog. And some grounds are going to be tighter. There's going to be more 90 degrees. There's going to be lines that run laterally. And you're not going to necessarily get to see a dog take a linear, 400-yard line maybe. But one thing that I always tell people, Greg, and maybe you agree with this, range is definitely the main thing that gets differentiated between these disciplines. But another thing that's different is, I can't put it in another word other than cadence. There's a different cadence with horseback trials than walking trials. And I guess what I mean by that is when you're on a horse, you're going significantly faster. Even if you're at a slow walk or a trot, you're going faster. And your dog learns those cadences of the speed of the handler and where they're going and where they can hear that handler singing, how far they need to be out in order to handle to the front and all that. And to think about these dogs like Guy, I'm fortunate enough to have one in my kennel that kind of know when we're doing one or the other, and they can kind of change that cadence, or they're really in tune with you. It just makes you realize that these dogs are capable of maybe a lot more than what we even subject them to.
And I totally agree. And think of how many dogs were, I won't say kept on the walking circuit, that could have been shooting dogs.
Absolutely.
I mean, you and I in prep talked about, Chris Catanzarite's backcountry dogs. I mean, those have won shooting dog amateurs. He's got a green jacket, a Purina award.
Yeah.
And he's the president of the U.S. Complete. He runs them in walking. Again, I've had a lot. I'll guarantee you, and I've seen enough of them run, Gary Malzone's dogs could go on a horseback circuit.
No problem.
7 out of 10 of his dogs could do it. Tom's got probably half of his could do it. It's what we expose them to early on. So what to do. So I think you're right. The cadence and the range, you scoop up into the horseback shooting dog segment. Then it's, and I can name the guys that have gone back and forth with their string. Steve Hurl comes to mind. He's very successful on the all age, won the national championship, comes down and just won the national shooting dog championship. So, again, it's handle and preparation. The shooting dogs, I won't say it's not like to hang on to them. I heard an amateur tell me once, I'm like, what's the difference between you're entering this dog in the shooting dog and you'll enter him in the walk or the all age? He goes, in the all age, I just let him go. I don't try and put a handle on him.
Yeah.
And I'll push him to the front, and I'll just keep pushing him to the front. It's like you said, some dogs know when they're being handled and when they're not, but I don't see much. I do see some difference in the shooting dog and all age in the far top and bottom, but the middle, man, so many of them. And I think I'm kind of under the same opinion that Dr. Stan Wynn told us in that last episode, that it wouldn't surprise me if it becomes one circuit. It is so close. But so the shooting dogs quote unquote, don't run as big as the all age. But again, that's a big gray area.
Right.
The Tracy's have got plenty of dogs that could do all age.
Oh, yeah.
Miller's Unfinished Business, all those, Joel Norman, Jack Miller, all those dogs can go back and forth. Steve Hurdle's done it. Bruce Minard tried it. Travis Gallhouse did it. And I'm sure I'm missing a lot of them. But
and going back to grounds, some of these owners and handlers, they'll play it smart. So if they know they're going to a certain venue, they know they have dogs on their string that can lay up on the on a shooting dog race at this particular piece of ground, or vice versa. They can run an all age race if the ground allows for it, and they'll pick and choose their spots like that. And one thing that I've saw, Greg, and I run at Berea. Berea's not the biggest grounds. It's a large piece of ground, but there's not the lines that you'd have in, Hell Creek and those type places.
Correct.
One thing that I've noticed is some of our horseback shooting dog handlers, they don't necessarily what we say boom as loud as like an all age handler would. They don't sing as loud, and I kind of figure that that's because they don't want to be too loud because they don't want that dog getting comfortable to go out too far. So if they lower their voice, that dog maybe draws itself in a little bit. And I thought that was real smart. And just goes again to show you the dogs figure it out if they're worked enough and if they're smart enough and all that.
Well, you're right. That comes in repetition and knowing when to let them go and when to sing to them and when to push them. And and again, like you said, it comes to the cover and what they're running in. And, are they at sedge fields? Are they on the prairies? Are they down, at the Southeastern? Are they... I saw Dunn's Tried and True run on the prairies. Oh, it's got to be 5 years ago. And he honestly, he looked like a speck on the horizon.
Wow.
And Luke sent Lee Phillips out to scout, and Lee was up on a hill on one of those big buttes, and Lee and his horse looked tiny. All of a sudden, you saw him coming to the front, off the bottom, coming up, and then I saw him 2 or 3 months later down in the piney woods, just as powerful. But you could tell Luke was hanging on to him a little bit different than he hung on to him out there. And he just went through that country and knocked it out of the park. So to be able to see those big running dogs in different areas, and a shooting dog might not, go over 2 hills. It might just go over 1 and come back to you. So it is the range.
And it's good to have these. It's good to have these different disciplines because it gives you an avenue for all different types of dogs, right? If you live in the North Woods, the cover dog trials are obviously going to lay up better for you. If you've got big ground and you've got access to horses, the horseback game is probably going to be somewhere where you gravitate towards. And if you're somewhere in the middle, maybe you don't have horses, but you got dogs and they're nice and they run big and stuff, well, the walking trial is right where you need to be. And one segment of our game that does cross-pollinate quite often is a lot of our walking dogs and a lot of the cover dogs, they compete, very often amongst the different formats. Like I can remember when Quail Trap Wheel would come from the North Woods off of Scott Chafee's string, I think, and he would do so good down at Berea. And when I first started, I'm thinking, this dog is not supposed to be able to do this. He is supposed to be in an aspen thicket pointing, razor bill snipes, not not my birds. And they did it flawlessly. But these dogs had so many different avenues if they could cross between those formats.
Well, the good ones, I'll say the good ones can, because I'll throw a challenge flag on that too. I've seen a lot of walking dogs get in the cover and they don't know what to do, and vice versa. I've seen cover dog guys come down to our spring trials, in an open field. They don't know what an edge is. Yeah, you look over and they're 200 yards to the left hunting the thickest stuff they can find. Oh, they're hunting. They're hunting, but they're not on course. So the good ones that we can see, and I wish I could come up with more. I think actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jet Setter started in the woods. Jet Setter did start in the woods, and I've got a note here to kind of throw his name in there. Yeah. Yeah, and you talk about Chafee's string. Bruce Minard went back and forth. Yeah, Tom has always, he kind of prides himself in being able to take our walking edge dogs and put them in the woods. Yeah, he's not going to win the cover dog circuit or handler of the year. Right. But we're in there finding birds and being competitive. And That's what I loved about, Guy too. So he could cross into many of those. We had a note here too about, I don't know if you want to jump into that, but the breeding between the different segments.
Absolutely.
So many of, I see it more in Nastra. A lot of those guys that I talked to them last week will stick to their own breedings. They'll stick to the Nastra dogs, and some of them have gone out to Shadow Oak Bow for the nose, and some have gone to Sunny Hill Joe on the bitch side. But for us walking guys, and I'll be totally honest with you, so I have a 3-time national champion walking dog. It's only been bred 4 times in its life, 5 times in his life. And they were all to local guys here, and Tom did it twice.
And that's fascinating, Greg.
Nobody's gonna come and run or breed to a walk-in. Unfortunately, not on the big circuit, but we'll go up and we'll breed to the National Blindsider and Shadow Oak Bowl, and Aaron's Perfect Storm and all those, because we don't want to dummy down the breed, water down the breed. We want to breed to the best, knowing that in every litter, they're not going to be all age dogs.
No, right.
So, I think we cross-pollinate in breeding, which is a good thing, because we always want to breed up. I always want to breed up, and maybe that's why the special ones on the walking game don't get bred, because it's the walking game, which is fine. But, we can go to the setters that are out there. Now the cover dog world, they'll breed the Ponderosa Mac, or they'll breed the Jet Setter, because they know that they're smart dogs that are in the cover.
Yeah.
So that's another difference in the different segments when it comes to breeding.
Yeah, I remember when I won the Region 4 Walking Shooting Dog Championship, I was just thinking in the back of my mind, oh my goodness, like you, I've done it. And I'm going to have to build a breeding shed, because people are going to be knocking down my door and they're going to be blowing my phone up, wanting to breed to this dog of mine. And I'm like you, I've bred him maybe twice. And at first that baffled me, but I also have a thoroughbred background, and I also understand the concept. You breed to the best and hope for the best. And people just have a natural tendency to look at horseback trials, if you're in the walking game, and breed and quote unquote breed up. They're gonna breed to a dog that has attributes that are maybe amplified, albeit race, things like that, thinking that as a whole or statistically within that litter, the mean will be something less than that, and that will be adequate for their use. And it's good thinking. Everybody has their own breeding tactics. They'll stay close to things. They'll stay within certain areas. Like you said, NSTRA has a tendency to kind of stay in there. I had a guy from the shoot to retrieve format who wanted to put a little bit of race into his stock, and he come to me. He was a local and said, "Hey, I want to breed to the biggest running thing you got." But he knows he's not going to get an all-age dog, but he knows he's going to get hopefully a trait that's amplified in that litter for what he needs. And that's the forethought about breeding. But yeah, breeding does cross-pollinate. You go back in those 4th and 5th generations, you'll see side-by-side crosses of Grouse Ridge Will in like an all-age pedigree, like it's sneaking in there. Or you'll see, Toccoa Mountain Sunrise back in a pedigree of, a really good cover dog. And families that produce bird dogs that excel in all of those things, and when the field trial game finds those individuals, they make their mark on the breed. They absolutely make their mark on the breed, and it's why these trials exist, and it's essentially why these different formats exist.
Right. Yep. One dog I totally, not that we need to name drop, whatever, but, Islander, the setter that on the East Coast, he produced walking dogs, horseback dogs. I put one of his first championships on him in a walking circuit. And he could have been, shooting dog champ. I don't know how many time champion he was on the walking circuit. But that was another very special walking dog. And he got bred a lot and produced a lot of really good ones. So there's the outlier.
Yeah, that's an outlier. And, you talked about Chris Catanzarite earlier, and he's got that backcountry bruiser dog.
Yep.
And it's like every time you open the field, that dog's winning in a different format and a different circuit. And it's like, when is this dog going to start winning like greyhound races and stuff like that? He's so versatile. And Chris obviously does a great job with his breeding. And, he's obviously got his breeding tactics too that work. So we've said that these things differ mostly in range and cadence, and there is cross-pollination and breeding and competition and all that. I think people have a natural tendency to think too, Greg, that if a dog doesn't work out on an all-age circuit, if it doesn't work out on a horseback circuit, they drop them down. And that may have a negative connotation to it, but it's a wonderful thing, and I think nobody has benefited from that more than like people like Gary Malzone. Gary Malzone has sniped some of the better horseback dogs on circuits and made absolutely gold walking dogs out of them.
Yeah. Well, and, I've always thrown my fishing line out there too to some of those guys too, and always said, hey, if
you got any scraps?
Honestly, that's yeah. Well, I don't put it that way because I don't want. Hey, I'll tell you, I've had plenty of scraps. I have too. But that's how I came across a guy. I followed Dr. Dunbar, who was very competitive on the amateur shooting dog circuit and a veterinarian and goes through a lot of setters. And I just said, hey, if you get one that's not going to, be part of what you want to breed or your program, keep me in mind. And that's how I got Guy. But I've also tried that a few other times. But you're right, Gary has had some. He's had that Aaron's setter. He's had Bocephus. He's had, Pure Confidence. He also has the resources of clients that are willing to go after those kind of dogs too, which you rarely see that on the walking circuit. And kudos to him and, that whole team, because they're such an asset to our NBHA.
Right. They are.
But you're right. I mean, he gets the breeding. He puts a handle on and the training and, wins with some of the big breeding and the big names. I haven't knocked it out yet, but I've got a speed dial son that won the Futurity, and if any luck and Lord will, and I don't think he'll be another guide dog, but he could win it. So I've got that. So that's an all age breeding. I've got a Touches Gray Street son that's only 2.5. So there is again all age blood in the walking circuit.
Yeah, big time.
That you can win with, and I too. A lot of those guys will. Actually, right about now, they're coming back from the prairies, and they know which ones they want to hang on to and which ones might be for sale. So, you just got to crack open the pocketbook.
The prairies have a way of sorting out those dogs that are going to want to grab, like you said, that extra hill. And it's not that those dogs aren't successful that don't make those strings. It's just they can go on and be repurposed. They've got a place in a walking circuit. They've got a place, maybe even in a cover dog circuit. Who knows? But those dogs will end up being repurposed because they don't make it on those strings of those guys. They're not being evaluated just for fun. They're there for a reason. The breeding's there, and the work has been put into them early. These are good dogs regardless of where they fall. Well,
and that's true too. You're right. Going back to your original point, is sometimes it gets a bad connotation of like, oh, you're just getting their scraps, or if it didn't work out for you, there's a hole in every dog. Guy had a hole.
Yeah.
He was so honest that he flagged this. If he got the littlest scent, he'll sit there till the cows come home, but he was flagging.
Yeah.
And once I figured it out, I'd release him, send him on, he'd do his thing. But every dog has a hole.
That's exactly right.
But there are a lot of good ones out there that won't be an all-age dog, won't be a shooting dog. Well, for instance, they just, what was it, the All-America or the All-American?
Yeah, the All-American Shooting Dog Championship.
He just took runner-up with Lester's another Shockwave.
Yeah.
Well, that dog was with Gary, and for whatever reason, was it range? Was it didn't get along? Was it he had too many dogs? Sold it to, the Kinkler, clients.
Right.
So that dog came off of the all-age circuit, won on the shooting dog circuit. So there is, there's a spot for most of these dogs.
And I'm going to throw something in here that we haven't talked about that's interesting about that dog that I think needs to be the future of trials to some degree. If you look at the ownership group of that dog, Lester's another Shockwave. It's what I'm familiar with in the thoroughbred world. It's a syndicate. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 different individuals in the ownership of this one dog on the circuit. And And look at what gets spread around amongst, several different people. Not only are you saving expenses, keeping a dog on a campaign, but 5 different guys are getting to enjoy the same dog. And how much fun is that?
Well, exactly. Just so you said, the camaraderie of going to a trial, even if you're not winning, you're there with your buddies. You're there with 5 other people. You're rooting. And you probably got a dog that you own by yourself that's going against those. So you've got ribbon. It's like going, taking your foursome golfing. You're all going to rip each other, but you're going to have a good time.
That's exactly right.
I talked to Lance Schultz at the Purina Awards because he won it this past year, and he talked about this dog, and they call themselves Prairie to the Pines or Pines to Prairie or whatever, because they've got owners. They've got owners from the Dakotas all the way down to Georgia on that dog, and they're making it fun, and they're making it a good time.
I think it's the future, and I think it's a good way to spread the love and get new people involved, especially at the ownership level. And I just want to put this out here. If you're looking for a syndicate partner, call me. If you got the right dog, give me a call. Maybe we can even get Greg to part with some of his money and jump in on one of these syndicates. It's a cool thing.
That's a good idea.
Greg, the judging standards amongst these dogs.
Yes, sir.
We've talked about range specifically, and those are the 2 things that mainly separate those horseback shooting dogs and those all-age dogs. All-age dogs, extreme. Like, we want those dogs reaching the outer extremities of what the ground allows for. If it's 800 yards, if it's whatever, we want to see those dogs reaching for the horizon. Shooting dogs, more handier range. We want to see those dogs cutting across, coming to the front, and being in places where birds are going to be found in a manner through which someone with a gun could take a crack at one of those birds in that covey. I think that separates those dogs fair enough. Agree?
Yep. That's it in a nutshell. And it's always, I stumble over my words to explain it, but you nailed it. And I would just say, the walking is a shooting dog range that I'll just say, check in a little bit more.
Exactly.
You don't want them coming back to your feet, but you want them to be a little bit more handy. And the cover dog, this is kind of, and I'll try and do this quickly. This is kind of gone from what I've heard over years, decades. When it first started, it's gone back and forth. They wanted them to bell range and barely can't even hear it.
Yeah.
So 5, 7, 8 years ago, it changed to the judges were wanting them closer, seeing them more often. Now it's kind of pushed back to a little bit more of, I personally, because I had a real honest one, want a dog barely at bell range that is just you're seeing it a few times and you're just hearing it barely out there.
Yeah.
So, and again, that all dictates on what kind of cover it is.
And I'm not going to name drop, but I had a discussion with a person entrenched in the cover dog world, and my opinion, and granted Joe's opinion, I think one of the things that's kind of changed or evolved that cover dog's range over time is the number of birds. So, like, I go to the Northwoods every year for a hunting trip with my family and spend a week up there. I know when there's been years where there's been gobs of birds, my dogs have been a little bit stickier. They've been tighter. There's been no need for them to take big chunks of cover. They're just right there. And years when those birds are thin, those dogs have a tendency to push themselves out a little bit. They're not finding it in that range that they're comfortable with, and they push themselves out a little bit. And maybe that's what's taking place in some of the cover dog trials is, the birds, like anywhere else, statistically the numbers are falling, and these dogs are just trying to get out there a little bit farther to help their chances.
Yep. No, I tend to agree with that.
I am going to drop a name with somebody. I had Tim Hammonds judge the National Amateur Championship, and Tim is a red setter guru from here in Berea, accomplished field trialer beyond, and such a great guy. Him and his wife, Christine, dynamic duo. He told me in a roundabout way that when he told people about judging walking trials, he said, look, you're looking for a shooting dog, but this dog is probably going to check in a little bit more. He's going to come to that top of the hill, and he's going to take a look, and he's going to see if his handler's there and if he's where he's supposed to be, because you're not 7 or 8 feet more up in the air on top of that 16-hand Tennessee walking horse. It is harder and maybe a little bit more difficult to hear that handler when that handler is on the ground. And that walking dog's probably going to check in a little bit more. Now, like you said, he doesn't need to be coming in over there and seeing if your boots are tied tight. But he's going to check in a little bit more often, and he's going to make eye contact with you a little bit more.
Yep.
Yeah. So with regards to standards of these dogs, Greg, are they all pretty much the same? Like when we talk about bird work, do these dogs all need to have the same arsenal?
Yep. If you're a broke dog, if you're past your derby, 2-year-old plus, they all have to be broke, steady to wing and shot. They have to back or not interfere. Stop the flush on a possible wild flush. Again, handle appropriately depending on the cover. You want them finding game, hunting the objectives. If they're there, you want to see them take an edge. If it's a whole edge, you want to see them take the whole thing. You don't really want them cutting off in the middle of a field and, piddling around in the middle of a field anywhere. So that comes to doing it appropriately. And a real smart dog will figure out which side the wind is coming off of that tree line and get to that side of the course. So the standards are the same. Walking, cover dog, shooting dog, all age. The range is what pretty much will separate them.
I judged with a guy a couple years ago, and we were watching this dog. The brace mate had picked up, and this dog was just cutting this field up beautifully, tail cracking, side to side, to the front. And he said, "You like the looks of that dog?" I said, "He looks pretty good on the ground." He says, "He'll never get nothing done on this brace." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he grabbed like a little piece of fuzz out of his pocket or whatever and threw it up into the wind. And the dog was totally running away from the direction of the wind. And he said, "How's that dog going to find birds running that direction?" And he had a good point. Those dogs do that. Let's talk about cover, Greg. I think the horseback shooting dogs and the all-age dogs, there's a lot of similarities there in the top ground and cover they run on. Maybe some of the grounds are bigger than others, but for the most part, they're comprised of the same components. There's long lines, big fields, bottlenecks. And like I said, they can be bigger than others, but for the most part, they're more or less the same thing, right?
Yeah, the shooting dog in the all age will put them down on big tracts of land or big piney woods that it's not so thick like a cover dog, but they can get on an edge. They can get down in the bottoms of Grove Springs. They can when the Florida used to be a run, there was some big country down there, and you would just see them rimming the whole thing. So you want to see the range. And again, I don't think there's anything better than seeing a dog on the prairie. So the prairie, they just need to stay in check, use the wind, and stay at between 10 and 2 and just keep pushing to the front.
Right.
And again, the cover dog habitat, whatever it might be in New Hampshire, is not going to be the same as it is in Gladwin and Michigan or in, up in Chippewa in Wisconsin. So to bring a dog like Chafee does, or Ecker, or the Foremans, or whoever from the East Coast to the Midwest, you might say, "Well, it's still the grouse woods. It's still the woods." It's different. It's right. A lot different. So they have to be special dogs there too. Our walking game, we can have a mix. You basically need a 1-hour course, which we say is about 3 miles. Give or take, depending on the cover. If there are edges there, you want the dog using the edges. If there's objectives, you want them checking the objectives, working, again, 10 to 2 to the front, and just stay around the course.
Yeah. Well, and, those cover dog trials, when it comes to terrain, they're drastically different than the other two formats. But like we said, they're run on wild birds, and those birds are habitat specific. They're region specific, and that's the main difference. That's Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, New York, New Hampshire, Vermont, Canada. List goes on up in that north and northeast region. We're going to jump ahead a little bit, Greg. Let's talk a little bit about, now we don't have time to talk about all of these, but let's just go over some of the main trials for some of these formats, and we'll just start with the horseback trials. In the all age, there's the obvious one, and it's the one that takes place with the big place that's got the plantation house and the big green steps. We know it as the Ames Plantation.
Yep, that's in Grand Junction, Tennessee. Second Tuesday of every February. Second Monday of every February. So that runs for approximately 2 weeks. So that's a 3-hour brace. One brace in the morning, one brace in the afternoon, rain or shine. The only thing they really stop for is lightning.
Yeah.
If it's unfair, if it's sleet, if it's a sideways wind, they'll stop it. But no, that's something to definitely watch and see. And again, other people have been able to run on those grounds, but they are to win the national at a 3-hour clip. is amazing.
And I'm telling you,
it's something to see.
You look at those pictures during the running, during those, essentially 2 weeks that trial's run over. Some of those conditions are absolutely putrid and brutal. There's icicles hanging off the undercarriage of those dogs, and they're covered in Vaseline. But you look into those dogs' eyes as they're crossing a field or whatever, those up-close shots that those people that do a great job covering that trial. And there is just something innate that's different in those competitors. They don't even think they know that the conditions are that bad based on their demeanor and how they're pushing through those elements and their fatigue and stuff like that. They're just on a mission, and that goes back to breeding and all those things. And I'm going to jump down to the next one. The Quail Championship Invitational is kind of the same way. I mean, you can run into some pretty bad weather out in Paducah.
That's a true endurance trial. I mean, you can talk about the format, but I mean, to go there and what is it, 3 days?
Yeah.
To go back to back to back.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So again, we're talking about dogs that are the elite of the elite Olympic athletes that we want to breed up to. So that's where you get in those all age top dogs. The shooting dog, you got the National Open Shooting Dog Championship at Sedgefields. So that I love Sedgefields. I mean, they've got morning and afternoon, beautiful stables, great plantation in Piney Woods, great people. It's amazing. I was trying to think of another shooting dog. Grove Springs, they hold a lot. Boonville, they hold a lot.
Right.
The Carolinas at Waynesboro holds a big one.
Yeah.
Nell Mobley holds, the Georgia down there. So a lot of them, after they've come home from the north, most of their time is spent, Missouri, Arkansas, Georgia, South Carolina.
And a lot of these trials have got so much history, like the Continental and the All Age Circuit. It started, back in, whenever, but it started in Manitoba, and it kind of winded its way down the country: Manitoba, Minnesota, Mississippi, North Carolina, Georgia, and now Florida. And it's one of the mainstays in the all age circuit. But the cover dog, the cover dog circuit, the Grand National Grouse Championship. I used to dream about winning the Grand National Grouse Championship when I first started bird hunting and getting used into competitive dogs. But that championship is a unique venue, or at least the grounds of which it's held on, isn't it, Greg?
Yeah, that rotates. They have kind of what they call regions or areas. Is it four or five? I can't remember. I think it's 4, because I think Minnesota and Wisconsin are kind of dovetailed into Michigan. But that'll rotate, different forests, different area. But again, all wild birds. Like you said, some years the grouse population might be down. It might not be a good year to be there, but you still got to be that dog finding that bird or finding that grouse. So it's very unique in the forest that they're running in.
When I got my dog back home off of the cover dog circuit, 2 of the things that I've got on my shelf are the leads, the commemorative leads for running in the Grand National Grouse Championship and the Lake States Championship, 2 massively big trials in that circuit. And I cherish those things. I didn't get a piece of those, obviously, and probably had no business there, but I cherish those 2 things greatly. And that brings us to our own world here, Greg, mostly where we reside, and that's the walking circuit. And it depends on which organization. All those, and we are a community of people that loves acronyms. We've got all these organizations full of acronyms. You'd think we were like a wildlife promotion place, because all those acronyms just go rampant. But in the NBHA, you talked about it earlier, Greg. We've got the National Open Championship, which is seemingly found a home in Danceyville, and it's our big dance.
Yep. Yeah, so you've got that. That's our qualifier, our callback in Danceyville. And, most of the Open Championships, especially the Nationals, are in the spring. Our National Amateur this year is actually going to be run in the fall in conjunction with the AFTCA National Walking Amateur Championship. So we'll run that in Covington, Indiana, at Keith Wright's Redwood Farm. We also host the Amateur Invitational, which this year will be one of the first weekends in December. The top 12 dogs get invited, the amateur points from the year before. And I think the Missouri team's going to host that at Grove Springs, but they're also going to host some companion stakes as well. Then, one of our big ones is our flagship is our Futurity. And, Jim Ogle puts a lot of work into that.
God bless Jim Ogle.
The second week in February, I believe it is, he's got the Futurity. He's got the Open Breeders Invitational, which is a shooting dog invitational championship. And then you got the Kilgore Puppy Classic. So you got those three major, and, that Futurity it's done so well under his leadership. It's just not a Derby stake that you're going to throw out there.
Right.
You want, and what we say is, you want to see the elevated standards, but they're so competitive dogs, and those judges sitting in that saddle, we'll be able to tell if a dog's not broke, if he's got all the tools and, Bobbles takes a step, or, Mark's Flight or whatever, we're going to use it. So it's not just a weekend Derby stake.
No.
But again, it's not, it's not a Derby championship either, but it's such a good event. And the puppies get pretty competitive. I'm not a big puppy fan to run, but you've seen some really good talent there.
My stomach turns. And this is what happens usually if you have a string full of older dogs. When you go to a trial and the trial chairman knows you, one of the first things they're going to ask you, if you don't have any puppies in her, is they're going to ask you to judge puppies.
Judge
now, look,
a puppy.
I know nothing of what it's like to judge at Ames, to judge the Continental, to judge the Grand National. I know nothing about judging those things. But my stomach turns when I think I have to look and watch those puppies, because it's like sorting cats. I mean, it is like... And I put so much pressure on myself to try to get that right. But, oh, my goodness, it is wild. But those puppies are getting used to that trial. They're getting used to horses, people, other handlers, a lot of other things. It's more or less a service to those people with puppies that want to be competitive with them later on. But
Agreed.
It is competitive, and we do have awards with NBHA for those. Like I said, those other acronyms, those other great organizations out there amongst the walking circuits, they've got their own championships, and they're all great venues as well. Greg, let's take a step back, and let's look at the field trial world in this kind of aquarium here.
Yeah. Okay.
If we're looking at it from the outside in, how do we grow the sport by Greg Blair's account?
I've been asked that in my position a lot, and they're not talking about money, and they're not talking about, sponsorships. They're just like, how do we get this thing to keep rolling? And again, like you said, organically, I think we have to do it ourselves. I mean, I keep going, like I thanked you in the beginning of this, to come up with this idea for the NBHA to host it, but to talk about the whole field trial game in general and all these other organizations that have acronyms and everything. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
We've got to self-promote. We've got to host youth trials. We've got to do things on our own dime. Carl Owens is doing that Carolina Jamboree where he's bringing in, the 4 all-age championships. He's going to the communities. He's getting restaurants to sponsor them.
Big advertising campaign.
He's doing it all himself. And he asked me, I said, do it yourself, toot your own horn. Yeah. Get your own social media page. No one else is going to do this for us. It's like, teaching your kids to get up, get off the floor, pull up your bootstraps. Let's go do this. So, fortunately, our club up here in Wisconsin, we've got great members. Some are getting older, some are younger. We have a good time. We go back to what you said earlier. We do want to win, but we don't care if we win because we're there with a lot of fun people.
Right.
That's our National Open Championship, our Futurity, our amateur at Keith Wright's place. We will have a good time. I don't care who wins.
Right.
But I do think we have to grow this sport on our own, and we have to look outside the box again to get more supporters, to get more sponsors, to get more financial backing.
We got to go after people too. Like, we can't just wait for people to walk up and go window shopping at field trials. You need to go and get someone that has a dog or has a horse or has interest in those things. Maybe all they do is keep a couple birds in a pen and shoot a couple birds at Thanksgiving. Go get that guy and take him to a field trial. Bring him in. And I'm going to step on a few toes here. There are a lot of people in the field trial world that take a lot. They go to a lot of trials and they compete a lot. But we need a lot of those same people to also give back. Like, we need those people to judge. We need those people to put on trials, and we need those people to help promote the sport. not only compete. Like, we need
Yeah.
all hands on deck, and we all want to
Yep.
compete. We all want to win, but this is a labor of love. Like, what you take, you need to try to give back, and not just that, but more if you can, right?
Yeah. And I totally agree. But there's a good group of young people up in Minnesota that's really pushing this on. The Carolinas, like I said, Carl Owen, they've got a good. I do see there's good people out there, and they're trying to grow this sport, and they're trying new things, and they're trying technology, like our podcast. I see Bobby Eckert's got a podcast. The Minnesota team is using Hunt Secretary, so they're using technology. We have to embrace it, promote it on our own shoulders.
Exactly. Hey, these new trialers that are so important and so coveted right now as our sport goes into the future, what advice have you got for these new trialers, Greg?
Come and ask questions.
Yeah.
And I would say for the old trialers, you see a car pull up that you don't know. You see someone get out that's got, flip-flops or shorts or whatever. They're there for a reason. You know how much anxiety it took him probably to drive up that driveway and get out of the car and come and, go up to him, say hi, introduce yourself. But if you're there for the first time, if you just got your dog and it's on a leash and you bring it out of your car and it's got a little, walking harness, and you look around and no other dog has a walking harness, they have collars.
Right.
Who cares? Bring it out, ask questions. I guarantee you someone will throw you on a dog wagon and chew your ear and tell you how you could get involved.
Absolutely. And field trials are they can be really intimidating. There's lots of big rigs there, a lot of dogs, a lot of people that look like they know what they're doing. And if you're the guy that's just got the one dog in the dog box and the pickup truck, that can be a pretty intimidating place. But you can't just stop at the parking lot with the intimidation. You got to go up and talk to people. And then in turn, like we said, you see that person, go grab them. Say, hey, you walk with me today, and please ask every dumb question that comes in your mind, because I want you to know when you leave here today what you've saw, because you need to know if you like this or not. And it involves those questions. So,
no, I totally agree.
20 years from now, Greg, that's a long time, but yet again, it's not. And this sport has evolved. It's changed. Where do you see this sport down the long road?
Oh, I always think 20 years from now is so far away, but we were just talking 20 years ago when I got started with that first dog, and that seems like yesterday. So 20 years from now, honestly, I think we need to come together. I think there's a lot of fragmentation of personalities, a lot of fragmentation of, again, as a shooting dog, is it all age? Is it not? Is it whatever? And maybe it is coming together as one segment. Maybe it is just coming together as friendships. Maybe it is, mending fences with each other. But if we want to be here 20 years from now, we're pretty fragmented right now.
Yeah, I think so.
And we need more open arms, which I think we're taking those steps. And I think I'm encouraged, don't get me wrong, and I'm not doom and gloom, but I want to keep this moving. I'm a competitor first and foremost. I happen to have a dream job that lets me see all this kind of stuff. But if I wasn't doing this, I'd be golfing. Yeah. And I'm a terrible golfer.
Oh, it's miserable.
So I want to keep doing this as long as I can get up on a horse and watch and walk behind my dog. So 20 years from now, I just hope we can all just bring it all back together. I don't have the magic pill, but I'll keep trying.
Right. I think you're a lot like a lot of other people, Greg. The sport in general is more important than agenda. It's more important than accomplishments. It's more important than, even its history. The sport being produced and promulgated into the future is the most important part, and it's going to take us. It's going to take us in the sport. No consultation group is going to show up and tell us exactly how to grow this thing and how to fix this. No. We may not agree on the color of the carpet in the house, but we don't need to go build a new house. We need to get together, and we need to patch things up, and we need to work on this thing together as a whole. If we want 15 acronyms, that's fine. That's okay. Yeah. But let's work together on the sport. Greg, you're a perfect guest, great insight, great context. Thank you so much for joining me, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it at any time, and let's all keep working together.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. Take care.
That was the Breakaway Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend, like, and subscribe to all of our social media platforms to stay up to date on everything National Bird Hunters Association and all other field trial related content. But hopefully, we'll see you next time at the Breakaway.